How's it going, everyone? This is Imperial Magistrate, and today I have a new tier list. This is the ranking of every Chancellor of Germany since the formation of the German Empire, the unification of Germany, starting in 1871 with Otto von Bismarck and going all the way to the current incumbent, Ulf Schultz. In general, I like reading about German history, especially modern German history. I actually took a course on modern German history last semester. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's just very fascinating, especially when you really consider it the current German system, and a unified Germany is fairly recent. It's only been around since 1871, and Germany since then has already taken on 4 different forms of government, basically. So we're going to get into this, starting off with Otto von Bismarck, the famous statesman from Prussia, helped unify Germany. Really not much else to say about him. He's easy S tier. He is the reason why Germany united in the first place. He governed the German Empire for nearly 20 years extremely effectively and ruthlessly. Even before that, he was Prime Minister of Prussia and was extremely effective. And, he basically ran the show. Kaiser Wilhelm might have been the monarch, but it was really all Bismarck's doing. So he is an easy S tier there. Longest serving chancellor ever. And really, there's never going to be another person like Bismarck. Just extremely effective leader. And he's also going to be the only one in S tier for obvious reasons. Next, we have his successor, Leopold Von Capri. And Capri was, he was solid. He kind of gets shafted just because of how impactful Bismarck was. But Capri was a very solid chancellor. He began opening up Germany's economy because Bismarck was very protectionist, and that did lead to some economic stagnation. Capri opened it up, which allowed for more free trade and allowed for Germany to grow a lot more. He did have his disputes with Wilhelm and the Reichstag, but for the most part, he was very effective. I think he was chancellor for 5 years or 8 years or so. But either way, he was a very good chancellor following a legendary figure. He was never going to compare to Bismarck, obviously. But, he did a very good job on his own. So I'm going to put him in A tier. Next, we have Hohenlohe Schillingfürst. Schillingfürst was not super important. He served for, I think, 5 years. Going to put him in C tier. The only real thing of note that I remember reading about him was that he appointed Alfred von Tirpitz to be the Grand Admiral of the Navy or something, and kind of led to the sort of aggressive building of the Navy and that sort of arms race with Britain. But yeah, not particularly important, so I'm going to put him in C tier there. Next, we have Bienhart von Burlo. Served for 9 years or so, or 8 years. And he was pretty solid. He did see very good growth from Germany. He did get along much better with Wilhelm than his predecessors did. Wilhelm II, that is. Wilhelm actually quite admired Bismarck, but they had a dispute near the end of Bismarck's time, in which Wilhelm refused to renew anti-socialist laws. And that's led to Bismarck resigning. Capri, again, Wilhelm did have his disputes with him. Schillingfürst, again, not really too much on him. Burlo was solid, though. He did make a few mistakes, one of them being the telegram incident, which wasn't even entirely his fault. It was just a big mishap. That isn't even what led to his resignation, and Wilhelm was disappointed when he did resign. What led to his resignation was he failed to pass, I think, some tax reform, and it was basically a de facto call for no confidence by the Reichstag, or the Bundestag. I think it was the Reichstag at this point still. So I'm gonna put him in B tier. Still a fairly solid chancellor. Next, we have Theodore Von Bethmann Hulvig. Hulvig kind of got the country into World War One. He oversaw, I mean, the alliance with Austria was already developing under these guys, but he, kind of pushed for him much more. He was much more for the war than Wilhelm II was. Wilhelm even sent a letter to Nicholas, his cousin, the Tsar of Russia, asking for peace. He also, tried to convince the Kaiser of Austria-Hungary, Franz Joseph, to accept the terms, or accept to lessen his terms with Serbia, I think, but really didn't avail. And he was just chancellor when the war happened, and when ultimately the German Empire collapsed. We're going to put him in D tier there. Next, these three guys, all pretty irrelevant. Von Baden was the final chancellor of Germany. He only served for about a month. They never served, none of these guys served more than 1 year. So really not too much to say about them. And I'm going to say it's basically the same for most of these guys here. The Weimar Republic guys. The Weimar was mostly a mess, and the chancellorship was constantly changing. These guys rarely held the position of chancellor for a year or more. Some of them were able to hold it for more than a year and get second terms. The only guy I'm putting higher is actually this guy, Gustav Stresemann. Stresemann, in his short time as chancellor, again, I think it was only like about a year, he enacted policies that decreased inflation and got the country's economy back on track, which led to the happy 20s, or the golden 20s as they're known in Germany, for obviously the Great Depression. And this guy, Franz von Papen, he was Hitler's right hand. So yeah, all these guys easy F tier. Thanks Adolf Hitler. Pretty self-explanatory. Then we have his the two successors who oversaw the downfall of Nazi Germany, Joseph Goebbels and Krosigk. Again, both were too short to do anything, and just easy F tier. Now we get to the modern Federal Republic of Germany. We start off with Conrad Aardner. Aardner was the first chancellor after World War II, and he was extremely effective. He was chancellor for 14 years. And I think he oversaw the creation of the Constitution of West Germany, and oversaw kind of the stabilization of the country and kind of bringing it back, and modernizing it, and just basically picking up the pieces of the country after the massive war. So very, very good chancellor. I'm gonna put him in A tier there. Next we have Ludwig Erhard. Not super important, served just 3 years. Gonna put him in C tier there. Not super important. Next we have Kirk George Kelsinger. He served for just 2 years. Again, not really that important. Gonna put him in C tier there. Next we got the first SPD chancellor, Willy Brandt. Brandt was a socialist journalist. His real name was actually Herbert Fromm, but he went by the pseudonym of Willy Brandt and fled to Norway during the Nazi regime. And then after the fall of the Nazis, he returned to Germany, changed his name to his pseudonym Willy Brandt, and became a politician and served as the Chancellor of Germany for 4 years. He kind of, pushed as this idea that, these guys were all conservatives, and they were all mainly for sort of liberal free market. Brandt believed that the poor were neglected, kind of pushed for more social spending and welfare, and he got elected because, the economy was starting to slow down and become more stagnant near the end of this basically 20 years of uninterrupted economic growth. But ultimately, he wasn't very successful, and he ended in disgrace, with one of his cabinet members actually being a spy for East Germany. So I'm going to put him in D tier here. Next, we have Helmut Schmidt. Schmidt served for 8 years. He was the successor to Brandt. after his disgrace. And I gotta give him credit, he did stabilize Germany. He was a bit more to the right than Brandt was, a bit more centrist. And he did kind of, you know, pick up the pieces of what Brandt kind of left after he ended in disgrace. It's going to put him in B tier there. Next we have Helmut Kohl. Kohl served for 16 years, and he is the longest-serving chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. He actually beat out Angela Merkel by just about 10 days or so. Merkel also served 16 years. She was kind of his protege, and he was fairly effective as well. Throughout the 80s and 90s, he oversaw the collapse of the USSR. Gonna put him in B tier. He did, I think, get caught with some corruption thing, and it did lead to his resignation, I think. But he was a solid chancellor for nearly 20 years. Not perfect by any means, but just decent. Next we have Gerhard Schroeder. Schroeder succeeded Kohl in 98 after his resignation, I think. And Schroeder was kind of a Bill Clinton third way type of guy. He was an SPD member, but was much more economically conservative, much more for free markets. He was fairly socially liberal. Still, he wasn't super effective in his 8 years as chancellor. The economy didn't particularly grow very well, and unemployment was still pretty bad during his time. So I'm going to put him in D tier. Next we have Angela Merkel, who served for 16 years, literally up until pretty much last year, I think, just 6 months ago. And, you know, many people respect her and all that, but I'm not a big fan of Angela Merkel. She's honestly just a little bit more to the right than Schroeder was. She's very neoconservative, neoliberal, whatever. Very globalist. Was kind of the de facto leader of the European Union. But she was also very reactionary. Like, she began a moratorium and shut down of all nuclear power plants. That had always been a debate throughout this time period. I actually think Schroeder also began the closure of power plants as well, but Merkel continued it, which has obviously been biting them back, despite the fact that nuclear energy is actually extremely, it is very good for the environment, it's very clean, and despite what people think of, like, you know, Chernobyl and all these power plant disasters, power plants are not any more dangerous than any other power plants. She has not handled the Muslim refugee crisis well, or the immigrations issues well at all. Gonna put her in D tier. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Angela Merkel. And then lastly, we have Ulf Schultz. He has only been chancellor for 6 months, but so far he's not really shaping up to be anything special. He's almost basically just Angela Merkel 2.0, except way weaker. Like, at least with Merkel, you could say she had a very strong leadership in the EU, whereas Schultz has made it clear that he's not as ambitious, and he wants Germany to take a back seat in the European Union and kind of let France sort of take that spot. So yeah, I don't really think he's gonna amount to anything. So gonna put him in D tier there, and that'll do it for my tier list of all of the German chancellors. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.